The blood trail leading into Vincent Pierce's barn told him something was terribly wrong before he even saw the woman collapsed in the hay. It was August 1881, and the Colorado heat had been relentless all summer, turning the earth around Pueblo into cracked brown clay that seemed to swallow moisture the moment rain touched it. Vincent had spent the better part of the afternoon mending fences on his modest cattle ranch, the sun beating down on his shoulders until his shirt clung to his back with sweat. All he wanted was to put his horse away, wash up at the pump, and maybe sit on the porch with a glass of whiskey until the evening cooled things down enough to breathe properly. Instead, he found himself staring at a woman who looked half dead, her dress torn and soaked with blood, her dark hair matted against her pale face. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hand instinctively reaching for her throat to check for a pulse. It fluttered weakly beneath his fingers, and her eyes opened suddenly, wide with terror. She jerked away from him, or tried to, but her body seemed too damaged to obey her panic. "Easy now," Vincent said, keeping his voice low and steady the way he did with spooked horses. "I am not going to hurt you. You are bleeding pretty badly. Let me help you." Her eyes, he noticed, were a startling shade of green, even dulled with pain and fear as they were. She looked to be in her early 20s, younger than his own 28 years, with delicate features that might have been beautiful if they were not currently twisted in agony. A bruise darkened her left cheekbone, and her lip was split. The blood, he could see now, came from a deep gash on her side where her dress had been torn away. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw and desperate. "Please do not send me back to my husband." The words hit Vincent like a physical blow. He had seen plenty of hard things in his life on the frontier, had lost his own parents to cholera when he was barely 16, had watched friends die in bar fights and cattle stampedes. But there was something about the pure terror in this woman's voice that made his chest tighten with anger at whoever had put it there. "I will not," he said firmly. "I promise you that. But you are hurt bad, and I need to get you cleaned up and bandaged, or you are going to bleed out right here in my barn. Can you tell me your name?" She studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Finally, she whispered, "Vivian Morrison." "All right, Vivian. I am Vincent Pierce, and this is my ranch. I am going to pick you up now and carry you to the house. It is going to hurt, but I will try to be gentle." She nodded, biting down on her already split lip as he slid his arms beneath her. She was lighter than he expected, almost fragile, and he could feel her trembling as he lifted her against his chest. She smelled like blood and fear and something else, something floral that seemed impossibly delicate given her circumstances. Lavender, maybe, or honeysuckle. The walk from the barn to his house felt like miles, though it could not have been more than 50 yards. His house was nothing fancy, just a simple wooden structure with 3 rooms and a porch that sagged slightly on one side, but it was clean and solid, and it was his. He kicked the door open and carried Vivian inside, laying her as carefully as he could on his own bed. The sheets were going to be ruined, but that was the least of his concerns. "Stay with me now," he said, noticing how her eyes kept trying to close. "I know you are tired, but I need you awake until I see how bad this is." He had some medical supplies, the basic things any rancher kept on hand for injuries both human and animal. He grabbed his kit from the shelf in a basin of water, then returned to the bedside. Vivian's eyes tracked his movements, still wary despite her weakness. "I need to cut away your dress to see the wound properly," Vincent explained. "I am going to try to preserve your modesty as best I can." She almost laughed at that, a bitter sound that turned into a cough. Modesty, that is rich. Vincent did not respond, just carefully used his knife to cut away the fabric around her wound. It was a deep gash that ran from her ribs down across her hip, the kind of wound a knife made, or maybe broken glass. His jaw clenched as he cleaned it, trying to be as gentle as possible while Vivian bit back whimpers of pain. The wound would need stitching, and he told her as much. "Have you done this before?" she asked, her voice thin. "On cattle and horses, yes. On people, once or twice. I will not lie to you, it is going to hurt like hell. Cannot hurt worse than getting it in the first place." He met her eyes and saw a kind of grim determination there that he had to respect. "You want something to bite down on?" She nodded, and he found a clean strip of leather for her. Then, with steady hands and as much care as he could manage, he began to stitch the wound closed. Vivian's whole body went rigid, her teeth clamping down on the leather, but she did not cry out. By the time he finished, sweat had broken out on her forehead, and tears leaked from the corners of her eyes, but she had stayed conscious through the whole ordeal. "You are tougher than you look," Vincent said quietly, bandaging the stitches with clean cloth. "There are some other cuts and bruises, but nothing else this serious. You should rest now." "Where?" she asked, glancing around the single room. "Right here. I will take the couch in the other room." "I cannot take your bed." "You already are. Do not argue with me. You need rest, and you need to stay still so those stitches hold." He left her for a moment to pump some fresh water, bringing it back with a cup. He helped her drink, supporting her head, then found one of his shirts for her to change into once she felt strong enough. When he left her alone to change, he stood on the porch and lit a cigarette, his hands shaking slightly now that the immediate crisis had passed. Who was Vivian Morrison, and what kind of man hurt his wife like that? The question burned in his mind, along with the promise he had made not to send her back. It was a promise that could bring trouble to his doorstep, he knew. Husbands had rights over their wives, at least in the eyes of the law, and interfering in a marriage could land him in serious difficulty. But looking at the terror in her eyes, at the wounds on her body, he knew he would keep that promise no matter what it cost him. When he went back inside, Vivian had managed to change into his shirt, which hung on her like a tent, and had pulled the blanket up to her chin. Her eyes followed him as he moved around the room, checking her bandages and making sure she had water within reach. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. "You do not know me. You do not know what I might have done." Vincent considered the question, then sat down in the chair beside the bed. "I know what I saw. I know someone hurt you badly enough that you ran until you could not run anymore. I know you are terrified of going back to wherever you came from. That is enough for me. My husband will look for me. He will be angry. Let him be angry. This is my land, and you are under my protection now. He wants to have a problem with that. He can take it up with me." Something shifted in Vivian's expression, a cautious hope creeping into her eyes. "You do not understand. Charles Morrison is not just anyone. He owns half the businesses in Pueblo. He has money and influence and friends in high places." Vincent felt his stomach sink a little at that. Charles Morrison. He knew the name, though he had never had cause to deal with the man personally. Morrison owned the biggest saloon in town, along with the general store, the livery, and several other properties. He was exactly the kind of man who could make Vincent's life very difficult if he chose to. "I do not care who he is," Vincent said, and meant it. "That does not give him the right to do this to you." Vivian's eyes filled with tears, and this time she let them fall. "You really mean that?" "I do." She closed her eyes, exhaustion finally overwhelming her. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into sleep. Vincent sat there for a while longer, watching her, and wondering what he had gotten himself into. Then he stood, checked once more that she was resting comfortably, and went to the kitchen to figure out what to do next. The next 3 days passed in a strange kind of domesticity that Vincent had never experienced before. He had been alone on this ranch for the better part of 3 years, ever since he had saved enough money working cattle drives to buy the land and start his own herd. He was used to solitude, to the company of his horse and his cattle, and the occasional visit to town for supplies and conversation. Having another person in his house, especially a woman, especially one as hurt and vulnerable as Vivian, changed everything. He found himself being careful about things he had never thought about before. He made sure to knock before entering his own bedroom. He tried to keep his language clean and his movements slow and predictable so he would not startle her. He cooked meals that were more substantial than his usual fare of beans and salt pork, trying to build her strength back up. Vivian, for her part, seemed to struggle with accepting his help. On the second day, he found her trying to get out of bed despite his strict orders to rest, determined to at least visit the outhouse rather than use the chamber pot like an invalid. "You are going to tear those stitches," Vincent said, exasperated, as he helped her back to bed, after she had nearly collapsed halfway across the room. "I will not be a burden," she said stubbornly, her face pale with pain and effort. "You have already done so much. You are not a burden. You are injured. There is a difference. Now stay in that bed, or I swear I will tie you to it." She actually smiled at that, the first real smile he had seen from her. It transformed her face, making her look younger and lighter despite the bruises that still marked her skin. "You would not dare. Try me." They stared at each other for a moment, and then Vivian laughed, A real laugh this time, not bitter or broken. The sound of it made something warm unfurl in Vincent's chest. "You are very bossy for someone who was minding his own business 4 days ago," she said, "and you are very stubborn for someone who almost died in my barn. I suppose we are even." After that, something eased between them. Vivian stopped fighting him so hard on every little thing, and Vincent found himself lingering in the bedroom longer than necessary, talking with her about small things. She asked about the ranch, about his life, about how he had ended up in Pueblo. He told her about his parents, about working his way west after they died, about falling in love with this harsh, beautiful country, and deciding to make it his home. "What about you?" he asked on the third evening, sitting in his usual chair beside the bed while the light faded outside. "How did you end up married to Charles Morrison?" Vivian's expression shuddered, and Vincent immediately regretted the question. But then she sighed and looked down at her hands, twisting the edge of the blanket between her fingers. "I was 18, she said quietly. "My parents had died the year before. Fever took them both within a week of each other. I was living with my aunt in Denver, working as a seamstress to help with expenses. Charles came to Denver on business and stayed at the boarding house next to where we lived. He was older, established, and he seemed kind. When he proposed after a month of courtship, my aunt encouraged me to accept. She said it was a good match, that I would be taken care of. How long have you been married? 4 years. 4 years of trying to be the perfect wife, of walking on eggshells, of never knowing what would set him off. He was fine at first, attentive even. But once we were married and back in Pueblo, things changed. He drank, and when he drank, he got mean. The first time he hit me, he cried afterward and swore it would never happen again. I believed him. I wanted to believe him." Vincent's hands clenched into fists on his knees, and it did happen again. Over and over, each time worse than the last. I learned to hide the bruises, to make excuses when people asked. Everyone in Pueblo thinks Charles Morrison is such a fine, upstanding citizen. They do not see what he is like behind closed doors. "Why now?" Vincent asked gently. "What made you run?" Vivian was quiet for so long, he thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "He came home drunk 3 nights ago, angrier than I had ever seen him. He accused me of flirting with one of the men who worked at the saloon, which I had not done. I had barely even spoken to the man, but Charles would not listen. He grabbed a broken bottle and he told me he was going to teach me a lesson about loyalty." She touched her bandaged side unconsciously. "I fought back this time. I had never fought back before, but something in me just snapped. I managed to get away from him and I ran. I did not even think about where I was going. I just ran. I knew he would come after me, knew he would be furious, but I also knew that if I stayed, he was going to kill me. It might not be that night, but eventually he would go too far." "You were right to run," Vincent said firmly. "You were right to fight back. You did not deserve any of what he did to you." Vivian looked up at him, her green eyes bright with unshed tears. "Why do you care? You do not even know me. I know enough. I know you are brave and strong. I know you deserve better than what you have gotten from life so far, and I know that I am not going to let anyone hurt you again, if I can help it." The intensity of his own words surprised him. He had known this woman for 3 days, had found her bleeding in his barn, and yet something about her had gotten under his skin in a way he could not quite explain. Maybe it was the vulnerability beneath her stubborn strength, or the way she smiled when she forgot to be scared, or the quiet grace with which she bore her pain. Whatever it was, he knew he meant every word he had just said. Vivian reached out and took his hand, her fingers small and cool against his calloused palm. "Thank you, Vincent, for everything. I know I am bringing trouble to your door, but thank you for giving me a chance to heal." He squeezed her hand gently. "You are not trouble. You are just someone who needed help, and I happened to be here to give it. That is all." But even as he said it, he knew it was not all. It was already so much more complicated than that, and getting more complicated by the day. By the end of the first week, Vivian was strong enough to move around the house, though Vincent still insisted she take things easy. He caught her standing at the kitchen window one afternoon, looking out at the land stretching away toward the distant mountains, and something about the wistful expression on her face made him pause in the doorway. "It is beautiful here," she said, without turning around. "Harsh, but beautiful. I can see why you love it. It gets in your blood, Vincent agreed, moving to stand beside her. The space, the freedom. Even when it is hard, even when the winters are brutal and the summers are scorching, there is something about this land that feels right. I have never felt free, Vivian said quietly. Not since my parents died, maybe not even before that. There were always rules, expectations, people telling me how to be and what to do. With Charles, it was even worse. Every moment was about trying to anticipate his moods, trying to stay small and quiet and invisible. You do not have to be invisible here. She turned to look at him, and he was struck again by how green her eyes were, like new grass after rain. What happens when he comes looking for me? Vincent, because he will come. Charles does not let go of things he thinks belong to him. Then we will deal with it when it happens, together. The word hung between them, weighted with implications that Vincent was not quite ready to examine. He cleared his throat and stepped back, putting a more appropriate distance between them. I need to ride out to check on the herd, he said. Will you be all right here by yourself for a few hours? Vivian nodded, though he caught a flicker of fear in her eyes. I will be fine. I can manage. There is a rifle above the door, loaded and ready. You know how to shoot? My father taught me when I was young. I am not an expert, but I can hit what I aim at. Good. I do not expect any trouble, but better safe than sorry. I will be back before dark. He hesitated at the door, some instinct telling him not to leave her alone, but he had responsibilities. The cattle would not tend themselves, and he had already neglected too much over the past week. Still, he found himself riding faster than usual, getting his work done with an efficiency born of wanting to get back home. Home. When had he started thinking of the ranch as something other than just his place? When had the thought of Vivian waiting there made it feel like something more? He pushed the questions aside and focused on the work. The cattle were fine, grazing peacefully in the south pasture. He checked the water tanks, mended a section of fence that was starting to sag, and made mental notes about what supplies he would need the next time he went to town. Town, where Charles Morrison held court in his saloon, where people would be talking about the wife who had disappeared a week ago. He could not avoid Pueblo forever, but he was not ready to face that situation yet either. When he returned to the ranch as the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, he found Vivian on the porch. She had changed into one of his other shirts and a pair of his trousers that she had belted tight around her waist, and her hair was pulled back in a simple braid. She looked up as he dismounted, a genuine smile lighting her face. How was the herd? She asked. Fat and happy. Looks like we might get some rain tonight, which would be a blessing. The grass is getting pretty dry. He climbed the porch steps and sat down beside her, suddenly aware of how natural this felt, this coming home to someone who cared whether his day had gone well. How are you feeling? Better. I walked around a bit, not too much, and I made dinner. Well, I tried. I am not sure it is very good, but I wanted to do something useful. Vincent realized he could smell something cooking inside, something that was not just beans heated over the fire. You did not have to do that. I know, but I wanted to. You have been taking care of me for a week, Vincent. Let me do this one small thing. They ate together at his small kitchen table, and Vivian had been too modest about her cooking. The stew she had made from his meager supplies was actually quite good, better than anything he could have managed. They talked easily over the meal, the conversation flowing naturally from one topic to another. She told him about growing up in Denver, about her love of books and her dream of maybe teaching school someday. He told her about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the freedom of the cattle drives and the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. It was not until later, when they were both sitting on the porch watching the stars come out, that Vivian asked the question he had been dreading. Vincent, what are we going to do? Long term, I mean. I cannot hide here forever, and you cannot keep me hidden. Charles will not stop looking, and eventually someone will see me or hear something. What then? He had been thinking about this for days, turning the problem over in his mind like a puzzle with no good solution. I have been considering that. There are a few options. You could go further west, maybe to California or Oregon. Start fresh where no one knows you. Alone? The single word held so much weight, so much fear and loneliness, that it made Vincent's chest ache. I would make sure you had money, supplies. I would help you get established. And what about you? What about me? Vivian turned to face him fully, and in the dim light from the house, her expression was fierce. Do you really think I would just leave? After everything you have done for me? After how kind you have been? Do you think I could just ride away and never look back? Vivian, I do not expect anything from you. I helped you because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted something in return. I know that. That is part of what makes you different from every other man I have known. But Vincent, I do not want to leave, not unless you want me to go. His heart was pounding now, his mouth suddenly dry. I do not want you to go. Then what do we do? Before he could answer, thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm he had predicted was rolling in, and the first drops of rain began to fall. They retreated inside, and Vincent lit a lamp while the rain intensified outside, drumming on the roof and washing the world clean. We could face him together, Vincent said slowly, continuing the conversation. We could go to the sheriff, tell him what happened. Maybe if enough people knew the truth about Charles Morrison, he would not have the power he thinks he does. The sheriff is one of Charles's drinking buddies. He would never believe me over him, and even if he did, what law says a man cannot discipline his own wife? I have heard of women going to the law before, Vincent. It rarely ends well for them. She was right, and he knew it. The law was not on her side, and neither was society. A woman who left her husband, no matter the reason, was looked at with suspicion and scorn. Unless Charles agreed to a divorce, which seemed unlikely, Vivian would always be legally bound to him. There is one other option, Vincent heard himself say. You could stay here, with me. Not as someone hiding, but as someone who belongs here. I know it is not perfect. I know people would talk, but you would be safe, and you would have a home. Vivian stared at him, her eyes wide. Vincent, are you asking me to live with you? I suppose I am. I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other. But I have never felt this way before. I care about you, Vivian. I want you to be safe and happy, and I think maybe we could build something good here together. People would not understand. They would assume we were living in sin. Let them assume what they want. Or we could get married, if you wanted. I know you are still legally married to Charles, but there are places west of here where no one would question it, where we could start fresh as husband and wife for real. He was saying too much, moving too fast, but he could not seem to stop himself. The thought of her leaving, of never seeing her smile again or hearing her laugh, was suddenly unbearable. Vivian was quiet for a long time, and Vincent forced himself to wait, to let her think. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. When I ran from Charles that night, I thought I was running toward death. I thought I would bleed out somewhere in the dark, and maybe that would be better than what waited for me if I stayed. But then I found your barn, and I found you, and for the first time in 4 years, I felt like maybe I had something to live for. You have been kind to me, Vincent, but more than that, you have treated me like a person, like someone with thoughts and feelings that matter. I did not realize how much I had been starved for that until I found it here. She took a step closer to him, and he could see tears shining in her eyes. I do not want to leave. I do not want to spend the rest of my life running or hiding or looking over my shoulder. I want to stay here with you and build something real, but I am afraid of bringing danger to you, of Charles finding me and hurting you because of me. I could not bear it if something happened to you because of my choices. Vincent reached out and cupped her face gently in his hands, mindful of the fading bruises. Listen to me. Whatever comes, we face it together. I am not some soft city man who cannot protect what is his. I have lived on this frontier for years, and I know how to handle trouble. More than that, I want to handle it, because you matter to me. You matter more than I can quite put into words. How can you be sure? We have known each other such a short time. I am sure because when I look at you, I see home. I see the future I did not know I wanted until you stumbled into my barn bleeding and scared. I see someone brave enough to fight for her own life, strong enough to survive what would have broken most people. I see someone I could love if you would let me. Vivian's breath caught, and then she was kissing him, her lips soft and urgent against his. Vincent wrapped his arms around her carefully, mindful of her healing wounds, and kissed her back with all the pent-up emotion of the past week. She tasted like tears and hope, and when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Please, Vivian, stay and let me take care of you the way you deserve. Let me show you what it is supposed to be like when someone loves you." "I will stay," she said, and the smile that broke across her face was like sunrise. "I will stay, and we will figure out the rest together." They stood there in his small kitchen, holding each other while the storm raged outside, and Vincent felt something settle in his chest. This was right. Whatever trouble came, whatever they had to face, it would be worth it to have her here beside him. The storm brought cooler weather, at least temporarily, and over the next few weeks, they settled into a rhythm of life together. Vivian's wounds healed, though she would always carry the scar on her side as a reminder of what she had survived. She proved to be an excellent cook and a hard worker, insisting on helping with the endless chores that came with running a ranch, despite Vincent's protests that she should rest. "I am not made of glass," she told him one morning when he tried to stop her from hauling water from the well. "I am healed enough, and I need to be useful. Let me help." So, he let her help, and together they fell into a partnership that felt natural, despite how quickly it had developed. She gathered eggs from the chickens he kept, tended the small vegetable garden that was struggling in the late summer heat, mended his clothes, and made the house feel more like a home than it ever had when he lived there alone. He taught her to ride his spare horse, a gentle mare named Daisy, and took her out to see the cattle and the full extent of his land. They were careful, keeping to the ranch and avoiding town. Vincent made one trip in for supplies, using the general store on the opposite end of town from Morrison's businesses. But he did not linger. He heard talk, of course. Charles Morrison's wife had disappeared, and there were rumors flying about what might have happened to her. Some said she had run off with a lover, others that she had met with foul play. Morrison himself was offering a reward for information about her whereabouts, playing the concerned husband to perfection. Vincent gritted his teeth and said nothing, bought his supplies, and rode home faster than was strictly safe. When he got back to the ranch and saw Vivian on the porch waiting for him, relief flooded through him so strongly it almost made him dizzy. "I was worried," she admitted when he dismounted. "I kept thinking maybe he had seen you, maybe he knew." "He did not see me, and he does not know. But Vivian, we cannot keep living like this. You cannot be a prisoner on this ranch, too scared to go anywhere or see anyone. That is not living. That is just a different kind of cage. What choice do we have?" He had been thinking about this on the ride back, an idea forming that was risky but might be their best option. We could leave, pack up and head west, to California or maybe up to Montana. Start fresh somewhere. Charles Morrison has no reach, no power. I could sell the ranch or just leave it for a while. The cattle could be driven north and sold. We would have enough money to start over. Vivian looked around at the land stretching out in every direction, the house they had been making into a home. "You love this place. I cannot ask you to give it up for me." "You are not asking. I am offering. Vivian, this land matters to me, but you matter more. I would give up everything I have if it meant you could be free and safe and happy." She was quiet for a long time, and he could see her thinking it through, weighing the options. Finally, she said, "If we run now, we will always be running. There will always be the fear that he might find us, that someone might recognize me. I do not want to live like that, always looking over my shoulder, and I do not want you to give up everything you have built here. Then what do you want? I want to stand and face this. I want to tell the truth about what Charles is, about what he did to me. Maybe no one will believe me, maybe the law will not care, but at least I will have tried. At least I will have said it out loud instead of carrying it in silence." Vincent felt his heart swell with pride and fear in equal measure. If we do that, there is no going back. Morrison will come after us with everything he has. He could ruin me financially, turn the town against us. He might even try to hurt you again. I know, but I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of letting him control my life even from a distance. And I am not alone anymore. I have you." "You do?" Vincent said firmly, pulling her into his arms. "You absolutely do. All right then. We will do this together. But we need to be smart about it. We need evidence, witnesses maybe. We need to make sure people see you, see what he did to you. So he cannot just deny it and make you look like a hysterical woman." Over the next few days, they came up with a plan. It was risky, and there were a dozen ways it could go wrong, but it was the best option they had. First, they needed to establish Vivian's presence in a way that could not be denied. They needed witnesses who would see her injuries, hear her story, and be willing to vouch for the truth of it. Vincent thought of Doc Fletcher, the town doctor who had a reputation for being honest and fair-minded. If they could get Vivian to the doctor, get him to document her injuries and her story, that would be a start. Then there was Reverend Thomas at the church, a man who took his faith seriously and had been known to speak out against injustice. Maybe he would be willing to help. It has to be public, Vivian said as they planned. If we go to just one or two people, Charles can discredit them or buy them off. But if we make it public, if enough people know the truth, it will be harder for him to deny. All right, then we do it at the church. Sunday service, when the whole town is gathered. You stand up and you tell your story. I will be right there with you. Vivian looked terrified at the prospect, but she nodded. When? This Sunday, 3 days from now? That gives us time to prepare, to make sure you are strong enough. Those 3 days passed in a blur of nervous energy and preparation. Vivian practiced what she would say, trying to find the words to explain 4 years of abuse in a way that would make people understand. Vincent cleaned and oiled his gun, checked his rifle, made sure he was ready for whatever trouble might come their way. He did not think Morrison would try anything in a church full of witnesses, but he had learned not to underestimate desperate men. On Sunday morning, they dressed carefully. Vivian wore one of the 2 dresses Vincent had bought for her on his last supply run, a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes. She left her arms uncovered despite the chill of the September morning, and Vincent could see the last fading traces of bruises on her skin. She looked beautiful and fragile and absolutely terrified. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked as they prepared to leave. "We can still leave, ride away, and never look back. I am sure I need to do this, for me and for any other woman who might be suffering the same way I did. If I can speak up, maybe it will give them courage to do the same." They rode into Pueblo together, Vivian on Daisy and Vincent on his gelding, Thunder. The church was on the east side of town, a white wooden building with a steeple that could be seen from miles away. When they arrived, services had just started, and the hitching rail was crowded with horses. They tied up their mounts and walked toward the door, Vincent's hand protectively on Vivian's lower back. The moment they stepped inside, conversation stopped. Every head turned to look at them, and Vincent heard the wave of whispers start immediately. There was Charles Morrison, sitting in one of the front pews looking prosperous in a fine suit, his expression shifting from surprise to fury in an instant when he saw Vivian. Reverend Thomas, who had been in the middle of a prayer, stopped mid-sentence. "Mrs. Morrison, is that you?" Vivian's voice shook, but she managed to speak clearly. "Yes, Reverend, it is me. I know my sudden appearance must be a shock, but I need to speak. I need everyone to hear the truth about what has been happening." Charles stood up, his face red. "Vivian, what are you doing? Have you lost your mind? Come here right now." The command in his voice was so absolute, so full of the expectation of obedience, that Vincent felt Vivian flinch beside him. But she did not move toward her husband. Instead, she took a step back, closer to Vincent. "No, Charles, I will not obey you anymore. I will not pretend that everything is fine when it is not." "You are hysterical," Morrison said, his voice taking on a reasonable tone that Vincent recognized as dangerous. "You are clearly unwell. Come with me, and we will get you home where you can rest." "I am not hysterical, and I am not unwell. What I am is finally free enough to tell the truth." Vivian's voice was getting stronger now, her initial fear giving way to anger and determination. "For 4 years, I have hidden the truth about my marriage. I have made excuses for bruises and cuts. I have pretended that everything was fine because I was ashamed and scared. But I am not ashamed anymore, and I am not scared of you, Charles. Not anymore." The church was utterly silent now, every person frozen in their seat. Vincent could see shock on some faces, disbelief on others, but also, on a few faces, he saw recognition. Women who looked like they understood exactly what Vivian was talking about. "These bruises you can still see on my arms, the cut on my lip, these came from my husband," Vivian continued. "But they are nothing compared to what is under this dress. Charles came home drunk 3 weeks ago, and he attacked me with a broken bottle. He cut me so badly I nearly bled to death. I ran because I knew if I stayed, he would eventually kill me. I ran until I could not run anymore, and by the grace of God, I found help." "You lying witch," Morrison snarled, his facade of reasonableness crumbling. "You ran off with your lover. That is what happened. You are trying to ruin me with your lies." "I am not lying, and Mr. Pierce is not my lover. He is the man who saved my life when you tried to end it. He stitched up the wound you gave me, and he protected me when I had nowhere else to go." Doc Fletcher, who had been sitting near the back, stood up. "Mrs. Morrison, is what you are saying true? You were cut badly enough to need stitching?" "Yes, doctor. The wound is healed now, but I still have the scar. I can show you if you need proof." "That will not be necessary in front of the whole congregation, but I would like to examine you after services, if you would allow it. If what you say is true, it should be documented." Morrison was looking around now, seeing that the tide of opinion was not automatically in his favor the way he had expected. "This is absurd. She is my wife, and what happens between us in our home is private business. She probably got that cut doing something foolish, and now she's trying to blame me for it." "Charles Morrison, you are a coward and a liar," Vincent said, speaking for the first time. His voice was hard, cutting through the murmurs that had started. "I saw what you did to her. I am the one who stitched that wound. I am the one who held her while she shook with fear at the thought of you finding her. Do not stand there and pretend to be the victim when we all know the truth now." Morrison's hand moved toward his hip, and Vincent's hand dropped to his own gun. The whole church seemed to hold its breath. "That is enough," Reverend Thomas said firmly, stepping down from the pulpit. "There will be no violence in this house of God. Mr. Morrison, these are serious accusations. Mrs. Morrison has the right to speak her truth, and we have an obligation to listen." "She is my wife," Morrison repeated, as if that explained everything, justified everything. "She is a human being," the Reverend countered, "and if what she says is true, you have committed a grievous sin against her and against God. Marriage does not give a man the right to abuse his wife." Vincent watched as Morrison realized he was not going to win this easily. The man's expression shifted, became calculating. "Fine. Let the doctor examine her. Let everyone see these supposed wounds. But when this is over, when you all realize she is exaggerating some minor domestic dispute, I want apologies. And you," he pointed at Vincent, "you will pay for harboring my wife and turning her against me." "I did not turn her against you," Vincent said coldly. "You did that all by yourself when you beat her and cut her and made her life a living hell." After the service, which Reverend Thomas cut short given the circumstances, a group gathered at the doctor's office. Doc Fletcher examined Vivian privately, while Vincent waited outside with a growing crowd of townspeople who wanted to know what was going on. Morrison was there too, surrounded by his friends and business associates, all of them looking skeptical and disapproving. When the doctor emerged, his face was grim. "I have examined Mrs. Morrison. She has a recently healed laceration on her torso that is consistent with her story. The scar is approximately 8 inches long and shows evidence of neat stitching. She also has multiple other scars and marks on her body that indicate a pattern of injuries over time." "This proves nothing," one of Morrison's friends said. "She could have gotten those anywhere." "True," Doc Fletcher acknowledged. "But I have also been the Morrison's family doctor for the past 3 years. I have treated Mrs. Morrison on 4 separate occasions for injuries that, at the time, she attributed to falls or accidents. Looking back now with this new information, I believe those injuries were also the result of abuse." Morrison's face had gone from red to pale. "You are taking her word over mine? She could have staged all of this with her lover to discredit me." "Mr. Morrison, I saw her the day after she arrived at my ranch," Vincent said, his voice carrying to everyone gathered. "She was bleeding so badly, I did not think she would survive the night. She was terrified, begging me not to send her back to you. That kind of fear does not come from nowhere." Sarah Jenkins, a middle-aged woman who ran the boarding house, spoke up suddenly. "I believe her." Everyone turned to look at her, and she flushed but continued bravely. "I have heard Mrs. Morrison make excuses for bruises before. I have seen how she flinches when her husband raises his voice. I did not want to believe it could be that bad, but I think we all suspected something was not right in that house." A few other women nodded, and Vincent saw Morrison's position crumbling. The man had relied on silence and fear to keep his secret, but now that it was out in the open, he could not bully everyone into compliance. "This is not over," Morrison said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Vivian, you are still my wife, and I have legal rights. You will come home with me, or I will have the law force you to." Sheriff Daniels, who had been watching the whole scene with a troubled expression, finally spoke. "Now hold on, Charles. If what Mrs. Morrison is saying is true, we have got a problem. The law might say she is your wife, but that does not give you the right to beat her nearly to death. She is exaggerating. The doctor does not seem to think so. Neither do a lot of folks here. I think the best thing is for Mrs. Morrison to stay somewhere safe while we figure this out. Maybe she can stay with Sarah at the boarding house, somewhere public where everyone can see she is being well treated. She can stay at the ranch with me, Vincent said. That is where she has been, and that is where she is safe. That is not proper, Morrison objected. She is a married woman, and you have proven you cannot be trusted with her safety. I would rather have her alive and improper than dead and respectable. The sheriff looked between the two men, then at Vivian, who had emerged from the doctor's office looking pale but determined. Mrs. Morrison, what do you want? I want to stay with Vincent, she said clearly. He has treated me with nothing but kindness and respect. I am not afraid when I am with him. I cannot say the same about my husband. Morrison looked like he wanted to argue further, but the crowd was clearly not on his side anymore. Even his friends were looking uncomfortable, stepping back slightly as if to distance themselves from him. Finally, he turned and stalked away, but not before shooting Vincent and Vivian a look of pure hatred. You will regret this, he called back. Both of you. Vincent put his arm around Vivian's shoulders, and she leaned into him, trembling slightly now that the confrontation was over. Let him threaten. We did what we came to do. Everyone knows the truth now. They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Vivian was quiet, processing everything that had happened, and Vincent let her have the silence. Only when they were back home, with the horses put away and the doors locked, did she finally speak. I did it, she said, wonder in her voice. I actually stood up to him. I told the truth. You were incredible, Vincent said, pulling her into his arms. You were so brave, so strong. I am proud of you. She buried her face against his chest, and he felt her shoulders shake with sobs. He held her while she cried, all the tension and fear of the past weeks pouring out in tears. When she finally calmed, she looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. What happens now? Now we live our lives. We work the ranch, we build our home, and we let Charles Morrison fade into the past where he belongs. It cannot be that simple. You heard him. He said we would regret this. Maybe we will face more trouble, but we will face it together, and we will get through it. I promise you that. She kissed him then, soft and sweet, and Vincent felt everything else fade away. This woman, this brave, beautiful, resilient woman, had chosen him, had chosen this life with him despite everything it might cost her. That was worth any amount of trouble that might come their way. The trouble came sooner than they expected. 3 days after the confrontation at the church, Vincent rode out to check on his cattle and found 2 of them dead, shot and left to rot in the sun. It was clearly a message, a warning. He buried the cattle and said nothing to Vivian, not wanting to worry her, but he doubled his vigilance. A week later, someone cut his fence in 3 places, letting half his herd wander onto the neighboring property. It took him 2 days to round them all up and repair the damage. The neighbor, a decent man named Sam Cooper, helped him and shook his head over the obvious sabotage. I heard what happened with you and Mrs. Morrison, Sam said as they worked. I think you did right by her, but Charles Morrison is not the kind of man who forgets a slight. You need to watch yourself. I know, but what else could I have done? Let him kill her? No, you did the right thing. I am just saying be careful. Morrison has money and influence, and he is not above using both to hurt people who cross him. Vincent took the warning to heart. He started carrying his gun everywhere, even when he was just working around the ranch. He taught Vivian to shoot properly, not just the basics her father had taught her, but how to handle a rifle with real accuracy. He did not tell her about the dead cattle or the cut fences, but she was smart enough to sense the tension in him. Vincent, what is wrong? She asked one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner. You have been on edge for days. He considered lying, trying to protect her from worry, but that was not the kind of relationship he wanted them to have. There have been some incidents, cattle killed, fences cut, nothing I cannot handle, but it is clear someone is trying to send me a message. Vivian's face went pale. Charles. Probably, I cannot prove it, but it is an awful big coincidence. This is because of me. He's hurting you to get back at me. No, Vincent said firmly, taking her hand. This is because of him. Because he is a bully and a coward who cannot stand that you escaped him. But we are not going to let him win. We are going to keep living our lives, keep building what we have here, and he can do his worst. Eventually, he will get tired of it and move on. But Morrison did not get tired of it. Over the next few weeks, the harassment escalated. Someone poisoned his well, forcing Vincent to dig a new one. His barn door was set on fire in the middle of the night, though they caught it quickly enough to put it out before major damage was done. Supplies he had ordered from town mysteriously went missing, and when he went to confront the merchant, the man claimed there had never been an order. "Morrison is telling people not to do business with you," Sam Cooper reported when he stopped by to check on them. "He is trying to drive you out of the county by making it impossible for you to operate. Then I will ride to the next county for supplies. I will do whatever it takes." "Why not just leave, Vincent? Take Mrs. Morrison and head west like you were talking about. Start fresh somewhere Morrison cannot reach you." Vincent looked over at Vivian, who was working in the garden, her face peaceful in the afternoon sun. "Because this is home. Because if we run now, we will always be running. I am not going to let that man take everything I have worked for." But it was getting harder to hold that position. Money was tight with all the extra expenses and lost cattle. He was exhausted from constantly being on guard, from sleeping lightly and waking at every sound. He could see the toll it was taking on Vivian too, the way she jumped at shadows and looked over her shoulder constantly. They were sitting at the kitchen table one night, going over the accounts and trying to figure out how to make things stretch, when Vivian put down her pencil and looked at him seriously. "Vincent, I have been thinking. Maybe we should get married." He blinked, surprised. "I thought you wanted to wait until you could get a legal divorce from Morrison. I do not think that is going to happen. Charles will never agree to a divorce, and I do not have grounds to force one, at least not in the eyes of the law. But if we were married, if I was legally Vincent Pierce's wife, it would be harder for Charles to claim any rights over me. It would give us some protection. Vivian, I would marry you in a heartbeat, but you are still legally married to Morrison. Any marriage between us would not be legitimate. Not here, maybe. But Sam was telling me about a town up in the mountains, a mining camp called Silver Creek. They have got a justice of the peace who is known for not asking too many questions. He marries people who want to be married, and he files the paperwork without digging into their history. If we went there, if we got married there, we could at least present ourselves as a married couple. It might not hold up if Charles really pushed it legally, but it would be something." Vincent thought about it. It felt wrong somehow, sneaking around and lying about her marital status. But at the same time, what choice did they really have? Morrison was never going to let her go, and the law was not on their side. Maybe this was the only way. "All right," he said finally. "We will do it. When?" "As soon as possible. I want to be your wife, Vincent. In every way that matters, I already am. But I want it to be official. I want people to know that I chose you, that we chose each other." They made the trip to Silver Creek a week later, telling Sam they were going to see about buying some breeding cattle. The journey took 2 days through rough mountain roads, but it was worth it to see the hope shining in Vivian's eyes when the justice of the peace pronounced them husband and wife. Vincent kissed her there in that rough office with its plank walls and dirt floor, and it felt more real and more binding than any elaborate ceremony could have been. "I love you," he said when they broke apart. It was the first time either of them had spoken the words aloud, though they had been implied in every action, every gesture for weeks. "I loved you from the moment you looked up at me in that barn and trusted me to help you. I loved you when you were brave enough to stand up in that church and tell your truth. I loved you through every hard moment, and I am going to love you for the rest of my life." Vivian's eyes were bright with tears. "I love you too. I did not think I could ever trust anyone again, did not think I could ever be happy. But you proved me wrong. You showed me what it means to be loved and respected and valued. You are everything I never knew I needed." They spent their wedding night in a small hotel in Silver Creek, and for the first time since she had stumbled into his barn, bleeding and afraid, Vivian seemed truly at peace. She fell asleep in his arms, her breathing slow and even, and Vincent lay awake for a long time, just holding her and marveling at how his life had changed. When they returned to the ranch, they found it ransacked. The house had been torn apart, furniture overturned and broken, dishes smashed. Someone had gone through everything they owned, destroying what they could not steal. But worse than the house was the barn. Vincent's spare horse, the gentle mare that Vivian had learned to ride, lay dead in her stall. Her throat had been cut, and the blood had dried to black in the hay. Vivian stood in the doorway of the barn, her face white with shock and grief. "Daisy," she whispered. "Oh God, Vincent, they killed Daisy." Vincent felt a rage building in him that was almost blinding in its intensity. This had gone beyond harassment, beyond intimidation. This was a clear threat, a message that said if they did not leave, something worse would happen. Well, Morrison had made a mistake. He had pushed too far, hurt them too deeply, and now Vincent was done trying to handle this quietly. "Stay here," he told Vivian. "Lock the doors and do not open them for anyone but me." "Where are you going?" "To town, to end this once and for all." "Vincent, no. Do not do something you will regret. Do not let him make you into a murderer." He looked at her, at his wife, and saw the fear in her eyes. Fear for him, not of him. It was enough to cool his rage slightly, to make him think more clearly. "I am not going to kill him," he said. "But I am going to make sure he knows that if he comes after us again, there will be consequences. I am going to make sure everyone knows what he did here today." He rode to town at a gallop, arriving at the sheriff's office just as the sun was setting. Sheriff Daniels looked up in surprise when Vincent burst through the door. "Pierce, what is wrong?" "Charles Morrison is what is wrong. He ransacked my house and killed my horse. This has to stop, Sheriff. I know you and Morrison are friends, but this has gone beyond a personal dispute. He is destroying property and killing livestock out of spite. Can you prove it was Morrison? Who else would it be? He has been harassing me for weeks, ever since Vivian told the truth about what he did to her. Everyone in town knows about it." The sheriff sighed and rubbed his face. "Look, Vincent, I hear what you are saying, but without proof, without witnesses, there is nothing I can do. Morrison will just deny it, and it will be your word against his. Then what am I supposed to do? Just wait until he decides to come after Vivian directly? Wait until he hurts or kills one of us? I will talk to him. I will make it clear that this needs to stop. But Vincent, maybe you should consider leaving. Not because Morrison is right, but because sometimes the smart thing is to walk away from a fight you cannot win. I am not walking away from my home, and I am not letting that coward drive me out." He left the sheriff's office and went straight to Morrison's saloon. The place was busy, full of men drinking and gambling and carrying on. Morrison was behind the bar, playing host and looking completely at ease. When he saw Vincent, something dark flashed across his face, but he covered it quickly with a smile. "Vincent Pierce," he said loudly. "I hear congratulations are in order. You and my wife got yourselves married up in Silver Creek. That is real romantic, running off like a couple of teenagers." The saloon went quiet, everyone turning to watch. Vincent walked up to the bar, his hand resting on his gun. "Your wife?" he said softly. "She stopped being your wife the day you tried to kill her. She is my wife now, legally married, and if you or anyone acting on your orders comes near her or my property again, I will not go to the sheriff. I will handle it myself. Are we clear?" Morrison's smile faded. "That is a threat." "It is a promise. You have done enough damage. You have proven you are exactly the kind of coward and bully Vivian said you were. But it ends now. You leave us alone, or I swear to God, Charles, I will make you regret the day you ever touched her." Big words from a man whose property seems to be having a streak of bad luck. Funny how that bad luck only started after your wife left you? Funny how it keeps happening, despite me taking precautions. You are not as clever as you think you are, Morrison. Everyone knows you are behind it. They are just too afraid to say so. But I am not afraid of you. He could see Morrison calculating, trying to decide if Vincent was bluffing. Around them, the other men in the saloon were watching with interest. Vincent knew he was taking a risk, calling Morrison out so publicly. It could backfire badly, but he also knew that bullies only respected strength, and he was tired of being pushed around. Finally, Morrison shrugged. "I do not know what you are talking about, but I will say this, Pierce. You stole my wife. You have poisoned the whole town against me with lies. Eventually, there is going to be a reckoning for that. Any reckoning that happens is on you. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences. Stay away from my wife, stay away from my property, and maybe we can both live out our lives in peace." He turned and walked out of the saloon before Morrison could respond, his heart pounding, but his head held high. It was done. He had drawn a line in the sand, and now they would see if Morrison was smart enough to respect it. When he got back to the ranch, Vivian was waiting on the porch with the rifle across her lap. She set it aside when she saw him and ran to meet him, throwing her arms around him. "I was so worried. I thought maybe he had hurt you. I am fine. I made it clear that the harassment needs to stop. Whether he listens or not, time will tell. They went inside and spent the evening cleaning up the mess Morrison's people had made. It was hard work and disheartening, seeing their home violated like this. But they did it together, and gradually the house began to look normal again. Late that night, lying in bed with Vivian curled against his side, Vincent said quietly, "I am sorry. I know this is not what you signed up for when you agreed to stay with me." "I signed up for you," Vivian said, "for us. Whatever that includes, I am not sorry. I would rather face this with you than spend another day living the way I was before. Still, you deserve better. You deserve peace and safety and a home that does not get torn apart every few weeks. Then we will build that, together. We will get through this, Vincent. I believe that." Her faith humbled him and strengthened him at the same time. She had survived so much already, had found the courage to rebuild her life from nothing. If she could be that strong, then he could be strong too. The harassment did stop after that night. Whether it was Vincent's confrontation or something else, he never knew. But the incidents of sabotage ceased. Days turned into weeks without any trouble, and gradually they began to relax, to believe that maybe the worst was behind them. They threw themselves into the work of the ranch, repairing what had been damaged and improving what they could. Vivian proved to have a good head for business, helping Vincent figure out ways to stretch their money further and make the ranch more profitable. By the time winter arrived in late November, they had restocked their supplies, repaired all the damage, and even managed to put a little money aside. Christmas that year was the first one Vincent had celebrated properly since his parents died. Vivian made it special, decorating the house with pine boughs and holly berries, cooking a feast that seemed impossible given their modest supplies. They exchanged simple gifts, a new shirt she had sewn for him, a book of poetry he had ordered from Denver for her. But the real gift was the peace they had found, the joy of being together without fear hanging over them. "This is what I always imagined a home should feel like," Vivian said on Christmas evening as they sat by the fire, "safe and warm and full of love. Thank you for giving me that." "You gave it to me too," Vincent said, kissing her softly. "I did not know I was lonely until you showed me what it was like to have a partner." They made love that night with a tenderness that still took Vincent's breath away. Every time with Vivian felt like a gift, like something precious and miraculous. She had been so damaged when he found her, so broken and afraid, and watching her heal and bloom and become fully herself again was one of the greatest privileges of his life. Spring came early in 1882, melting the snow and bringing new life to the land. Vivian announced in March that she was pregnant, and Vincent felt joy and terror in equal measure. A baby. They were going to have a baby. It seemed impossible and perfect and terrifying all at once. "Are you happy?" Vivian asked, watching his face anxiously. "Happy? I am ecstatic. Scared out of my mind, but ecstatic. Me too. I never thought I would have children. With Charles, the thought of bringing a baby into that situation was unbearable. But with you, it feels right. It feels like the next chapter of our life together." The pregnancy was not easy. Vivian suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, barely able to keep anything down. Vincent fretted over her constantly, trying to find foods that would not make her ill, making sure she rested enough. As she grew larger, the summer heat became oppressive, and she struggled with swollen ankles and an aching back. But through it all, she maintained a kind of serene happiness that made her seem to glow. They had still not heard anything from Charles Morrison. According to the occasional news Vincent got from town, Morrison had mostly withdrawn from public life, spending his time drinking in his own saloon and letting his businesses decline. The rumor was that he had lost a significant amount of money gambling and was selling off properties to cover his debts. Vincent felt no sympathy for the man, but he was relieved that Morrison seemed to have lost interest in pursuing revenge. Their son was born on a hot September night, arriving fast and furious after a labor that lasted only a few hours. Vincent delivered the baby himself with the help of Sarah Jenkins, who had ridden out from town when Vivian's pains started. He cut the cord with shaking hands and placed the screaming, red-faced infant on Vivian's chest, overcome with emotion. "He is perfect," Vivian whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Vincent, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Victor, after Vincent's father. Victor Pierce, born into a life of freedom and love, never to know the kind of fear and pain his mother had escaped. Vincent held his son and made silent promises. He would protect this child, would teach him to be strong and kind, would make sure he grew up knowing what it meant to treat people with respect and dignity. Life settled into a new rhythm after Victor's birth. The ranch kept them busy, but they made time for their son, for each other, for building the family and home they had both dreamed of. Vivian was a natural mother, patient and loving, even when Victor was colicky and crying for hours. Vincent discovered reserves of tenderness he had not known he possessed, rocking his son to sleep and singing rough lullabies in the middle of the night. 2 years later, they had a daughter, Grace, who had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair. She was calmer than Victor had been, content to watch the world with solemn attention. Their family was complete, their home was full, and Vincent could not imagine wanting anything more than what he already had. They heard in 1884 that Charles Morrison had died, found dead in his room above the saloon after drinking himself into oblivion one night too many. Vincent told Vivian gently, not sure how she would react to the news. She was quiet for a moment, then said simply, "I hope he finds peace now. I hope whatever demons drove him to be so cruel are finally silenced. You are more generous than he deserves. Maybe, but carrying hate and anger only hurts me. He cannot hurt me anymore, cannot control my life anymore. I am free of him in every possible way." With Morrison's death, even the shadow that had hung over their marriage was lifted. They were truly, completely free. Vincent took Vivian and the children into Pueblo that spring, walking through town with his head held high. People greeted them warmly, asking after the children and complimenting Vivian on the hat she was wearing. They had become a respected part of the community. Their scandal faded into just another story people told about the wild days of the frontier. The years passed in the way that happy years do, both quickly and slowly at the same time. Victor grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the ranch and everything about it. Grace was more adventurous, always getting into things and asking questions about everything. They added on to the house, built a new barn, increased their herd. The ranch prospered, and with it, so did their family. On a September evening in 1891, Vincent and Vivian sat on their porch watching the sunset while their children played in the yard. Victor, now 9, was teaching his 7-year-old sister to rope a fence post. Their laughter carried on the evening air, sweet and bright. "Do you remember the night we met?" Vivian asked, her hand finding Vincent's. "Every detail. You were bleeding in my barn, scared and hurt, and absolutely the bravest person I had ever met. I was terrified. I thought I was going to die. And then you were there, and somehow I knew I was going to be all right. 10 years, Vincent marveled. 10 years since you stumbled into my life and changed everything? Changed it for the better, I hope." He pulled her close, kissing her temple. "For the infinitely better. You gave me everything I did not know I needed. A partner, a family, a home that is more than just walls and a roof. You gave me love. You gave me freedom," Vivian said softly. "You gave me the chance to be myself, to heal, to grow into the person I was meant to be. You saved my life that night in the barn, but you did so much more than that. You taught me how to live again." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to purple to deep blue. Victor called out that he had successfully roped the post, and Grace was demanding her turn. Inside, dinner was waiting, and later there would be bedtime stories and tucked-in kisses. Tomorrow there would be work to do, cattle to tend, a ranch to run. But right now, in this moment, everything was perfect. Vincent looked at his wife, still beautiful to him after a decade together, her face peaceful and content in the fading light. He thought about the scared woman who had begged him not to send her back to her husband, about the journey they had taken from that moment to this one. "I love you," he said, because the words never got old, never felt like anything less than profound truth. "I love you too," Vivian replied, squeezing his hand, "forever and always." As the stars began to appear overhead, the Pierce family was together, safe and whole, and deeply, enduringly happy. The past, with all its pain and fear, had been left behind, transformed into the foundation for a future built on love, respect, and unshakable partnership. They had fought for their happiness, had earned every moment of peace they now enjoyed, and it was worth it. Every struggle, every hard moment, every sacrifice had been worth it to arrive here, in this life they had built together. Vincent knew that whatever challenges still lay ahead, they would face them the way they had faced everything else, together, united, and unbreakable. The house glowed with lamplight behind them, warm and welcoming. Victor and Grace came running up the porch steps, breathless and happy, demanding their parents settle a dispute about who had done better at roping. Vivian laughed and pulled them both close while Vincent looked on, his heart so full it felt like it might overflow. This was home. This was family. This was the happy ending neither of them had dared to dream of in those dark early days. And as they all went inside together, Vincent Pierce said a silent prayer of gratitude for the day a bleeding woman stumbled into his barn and changed his life forever. Years continued to pass in their blessed corner of Colorado. The ranch expanded further, and Victor showed natural skill in working with cattle. Grace, as she grew older, displayed an unexpected talent for breaking horses. Vincent taught both children everything he knew, while Vivian ensured they received proper education, teaching them to read and write and figure in the evenings after ranch work was done. In 1895, when Victor was 13 and Grace 11, they had their first real crisis as a family. A drought had struck the region, the worst anyone could remember. The grass withered to brown dust, water sources dried up, and cattle began to die. Vincent worked himself to exhaustion, trying to keep the herd alive, hauling water from the creek that was now barely a trickle, moving cattle constantly to find any remaining grazing. One evening, after another long day of losing cattle they could not afford to lose, Vincent sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. Vivian came up behind him, her hands gentle on his shoulders. "We will get through this," she said quietly. "We have survived worse. I do not know if we can. If this drought does not break soon, we are going to lose everything. Years of work, just gone. Then we will start over. We will rebuild. Vincent, as long as we have each other, as long as we have our children and our health, we have everything that truly matters. The ranch is important, but it is not everything." Her words steadied him, reminded him of what he had learned 10 years ago when a woman stumbled into his barn and turned his world upside down. The things that truly mattered could not be measured in acres or heads of cattle. They were measured in love and family and the strength to face whatever came together. The drought did eventually break, late summer rains finally arriving to save what remained of their herd. They had lost nearly half their cattle, had gone deep into debt buying hay and water rights, but they had survived. And in surviving, they had proven once again that together they could weather any storm. Victor married young, at 19, to a rancher's daughter from the next county. Elizabeth was a practical, hard-working girl who loved Victor with a fierce devotion that reminded Vincent of his own wife. They built a house on the far section of the Pierce Ranch, and soon there were grandchildren, sturdy boys and girls who ran through the growing compound of buildings that now made up the family property. Grace did not marry until she was 25, choosing instead to work alongside her father and brother, becoming one of the finest horse trainers in the region. When she finally did marry, it was to a quiet veterinarian named James, who moved to Pueblo to be with her. They built their home on another section of the ranch, and Grace continued her work with horses while James established a practice serving ranchers throughout the area. By 1905, Vincent was 52 years old, his hair more gray than black, his face weathered by decades of sun and wind. Vivian was 46, still beautiful in his eyes, though she complained about the lines around her eyes and the silver threading through her dark hair. They sat on the porch of the house they had expanded and improved over the years, watching their grandchildren play in the yard while their children worked the land. "Did you ever imagine this?" Vivian asked, her hand in his as always. "All those years ago, did you imagine we would build something so big and beautiful?" "I did not imagine anything beyond getting you well enough to survive," Vincent admitted. "But every day since has been better than anything I could have dreamed. We have been very blessed. We have earned our blessings. You earned yours the day you found the courage to leave a situation that was killing you. I like to think I earned mine by having the good sense to help you, and then the better sense to love you." Vivian laughed, the sound still as sweet to him as it had been 24 years ago. "You were pretty smart, I will give you that." They watched Victor working with one of his sons, teaching the boy to throw a rope just as Vincent had taught him. Grace rode by on a magnificent black horse she was training, waving at her parents as she passed. The sun was setting, painting the Colorado sky in those familiar shades of orange and purple that Vincent had watched for decades. "What do you think happens after all this?" Vivian asked quietly. "After we are gone, after our time here is done, I think we leave behind something that matters. Not just the ranch or the property, but a family built on love and respect. We leave behind children who know how to work hard and treat people decently. We leave behind the example of what it means to stand by each other no matter what comes. That is a legacy worth having." "I could not have asked for a better life," Vivian said, tears shining in her eyes. "You gave me everything, Vincent Pierce. Everything I thought I had lost. Everything I did not dare hope for. You gave me a life worth living. You gave me the same, Vivian Pierce. And I have thanked God every single day for the moment you collapsed in my barn and asked me not to send you back. That was the moment my real life began." They sat together as the light faded, surrounded by the sounds of the family they had created. Children's laughter, the lowing of cattle, the soft sounds of evening settling over the land. This was their happy ending, not a single moment, but an entire lifetime, built moment by moment, choice by choice, together. When Vincent Pierce finally passed in 1918 at the age of 65, he died peacefully in his sleep with Vivian beside him. His children and grandchildren filled the house, their grief profound but tempered by gratitude for the life he had lived and the legacy he left. Vivian lived another 12 years, dying in 1930 at the age of 71. On her deathbed, surrounded by the family she and Vincent had built, her last words were, "Tell Vincent I am coming home." They were buried side by side on a hillside overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and dates and a single inscription: "Together, always." The Pierce Ranch continued through the generations, their story becoming family legend. Great-grandchildren who never met Vincent and Vivian nevertheless grew up knowing about the cowboy who found a bleeding woman in his barn and chose to save her, and the woman who found the courage to ask for help when she needed it most. They knew about the love that had defied convention and expectation, the partnership that had weathered every storm, the family that had been built on a foundation of respect and devotion. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Colorado plains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the descendants of Vincent and Vivian Pierce would sometimes stand on that old porch and swear they could feel the presence of their ancestors. Not sad or haunting, but peaceful and content. A reminder that true love does not end with death, but echoes through generations, shaping lives and inspiring hope. The story of the cowboy and the woman he found bleeding in his barn became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of compassion, the strength that comes from facing fear, and the transformative force of love freely given. It was a reminder that sometimes the most important moment in a life comes when you choose to help someone who desperately needs it, when you stand up against injustice even when it costs you, when you build something beautiful from the broken pieces of what came before. Vincent Pierce's descendants continued working the land he had claimed and built upon, each generation adding their own chapter to the story. They faced their own trials, their own sorrows and joys, their own moments of choice and courage. But always, they carried with them the knowledge of where they came from, of the love story that had started it all. And somewhere in the land itself, in the soil and the grass and the wind that swept across the plains, the memory of that love endured. The memory of a frightened woman who asked for help and a lonely man who gave it. The memory of two people who chose each other despite every obstacle, who built a life of profound happiness from the ashes of pain and fear. Their story was proof that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best, that sometimes the thing we think will destroy us actually saves us. That love, real love, built on respect and partnership and genuine care, can transform everything. The Pierce Ranch still stands today, more than a century after Vincent first claimed that land. The original house has been preserved as a family museum of sorts, filled with photographs and artifacts from that first generation. On the mantel sits a framed piece of needlework Vivian made in her later years, her stitching sure despite aging hands. It reads simply, "He found me in the darkness and led me to the light. Our love was my salvation." Visitors to the ranch often ask about the graves on the hillside, about the couple buried there with their simple stones and their eternal promise. The Pierce family tells their story gladly, keeping the memory alive for another generation. They tell about courage and compassion, about the healing power of love, about building something lasting from broken beginnings. And always at the end of the story, they They mention what Vincent used to say in his later years. When asked about the night he found Vivian in his barn, he would smile and shake his head and say, "I thought I was saving her life. Turned out she saved mine too. We saved each other. And then we built something beautiful together. That is what love is supposed to do." That truth echoes still across the Colorado plains. A love story for the ages, a reminder that happy endings are not just for fairy tales. Sometimes they happen in real life, to real people who have the courage to reach for them despite the cost. Sometimes they start in the unlikeliest of places, with the unlikeliest of circumstances, and bloom into something that lasts forever. Vincent and Vivian Pierce found their happy ending not in a single moment, but in a lifetime of moments. Each one a choice to love, to trust, to build, to hope. And in doing so, they created something that transcended their own lives, a legacy of love that would inspire and guide generations yet to come. Their story began with blood and fear in a barn on an August night in 1881. It ended with peace and contentment on a hillside, overlooking the land they had loved and worked and built upon together. And in between, they lived a life that proved love is stronger than fear, gentler than force, and more enduring than any storm. That was their gift to each other and to all who came after them, the knowledge that sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms, that courage can be found in the darkest moments, and that true love, freely given and gratefully received, can transform two broken people into something whole and beautiful and lasting. The cowboy who found her bleeding in his barn, the woman who said, "Please do not send me back to my husband." Two people who should have been just another sad story from the Old West. Instead, they became a love story that lasted lifetimes, that built a dynasty, that proved happy endings are possible even after the worst beginnings. And that is the end of their story, though the love they created lives on in every descendant who bears their name, in every person who hears their tale and finds hope in it, in the very land itself that still carries the imprint of their devotion. Vincent and Vivian Pierce, together always, just as they promised. The end.